Okay, good morning everybody. Here is Monday's lesson. This is not new. We did this all in chapter 9 worksheets before we went to the trig chapter 12. So you have a lot of notes here, just refreshing your memory. Our goal today, we are going to be solve by factoring. Remember, solve means find your zeros, find your roots, find your x-intercepts, find your solutions. First way you're going to be working on and always look for is the greatest common factor. 16x squared plus 8x. Greatest common factor is 8x. When I factor out 8x, what do I multiply 8x by to get to 16x squared? I multiply it by 2x. 8x times 2x gives me my 16x squared. 8x times what gives me my 8x? It would be 1. So 8x times the quantity 2x plus 1 equals 0 is its factored form. Now we are solving it. 8x equals 0. Divide both sides by 8. You get x is 0. 2x plus 1 equals 0. Subtract 1. 2x equals negative 1. Divide by 2. X is negative 1/2. My roots, my zeros, my x-intercepts, if I were going to graph it, would be at 0 and at negative 1/2. Now you try. 20x squared plus 15x equals 0. If you want to hit pause for a second and then try the problem, that'd be great. Okay, greatest common factor between 20x squared and 15x is 5x. 5x times 4x gives me my 20x squared. 5x times 3 gives me my 15x. So I know that I have factored out the greatest common factor. Then I'm going to solve. 5x equals 0. Divide both sides by 5, x equals 0. And then the other one, 4x plus 3 equals 0. Subtract 3 from both sides. 4x equals negative 3. Divide by 4, x equals negative 3/4. So those would be your two zeros, your two x-intercepts. That was greatest common factor. Always look for that first. It may make ugly problems easier to work with. Okay, the second type we're working with is called a trinomial perfect square. Trinomial means it has 3 terms. Perfect square means the first term and the last term are perfect squares. X squared plus 16x plus 64 is a trinomial perfect square. Trinomial, 3 terms. X squared is a perfect square. It's the result of x times x. 64 is a perfect square. It's the result of 8 times 8. So how does it factor? What multiplies together to give me x squared? X and x. What do I know about my signs? They're the same. What are both of my signs? They're positive. So it becomes x plus 8 and x plus 8. Checking it, first, x times x, x squared. Outer, x times 8, 8x. Inner, 8 times x, 8x. That gives me my 16x we were looking for. And 8 times 8 gives me my 64. When you're factoring trinomial perfect squares, your parentheses should look identical. Okay, right there. Parentheses look exactly the same. Okay, let's do another one. 4x squared minus 12x plus 9. 4x squared is a perfect square. 9 is a perfect square. Let's see if it's a trinomial perfect square. What multiplies together to give me 4x squared? If it's a trinomial perfect square, it has to be the same number. 2x gives me 4x squared. What do I know about my signs? They're the same. Looking at my middle term, what are my signs? They're both negatives. What multiplies together to give me 9? 3 and 3. Let's check it. Always check by FOIL to make sure you factored correctly. 2x times 2x, 4x squared. 2x times negative 3, negative 6x. Negative 3 times 2x, negative 6x. That gets me my negative 12x I'm looking for. Negative 3 times negative 3 gives me my positive 9. This is called a double root. If you were going to graph it, it's going to only have one x-intercept. Now we have 2x minus 3 equals 0. Add 3 to both sides. We have 2x equals 3. Divide both sides by 2. X equals 3/2. Leave it as a fraction. You don't need to change it to a decimal. Life is good. We're moving on. Okay, those were trinomial perfect squares. When you factor trinomial perfect squares, your parentheses will look identical. Next one's called the difference of perfect squares. The big thing about difference of perfect squares is there's only 2 terms. Okay? And they're both, it's got to be subtraction, which is what difference means, and they're both perfect squares. X times x gives me x squared. 3 times 3 gives me 9. So it factors into x times x. What gives me negative 9? Positive 3, negative 3. Check it. X squared minus 3x plus 3x. That gives me my middle term to become 0. B term drops out. And my last term is negative 9. Okay. In difference of perfect squares, your parentheses are going to look the same except for your signs. Now to solve it, x plus 3 equals 0, so x would be negative 3. X minus 3 equals 0, so x would be 3. Okay, if you get a problem like this one where it says x squared equals 64, the first thing we have to do is get everything on one side so we can factor. So we subtract 64 from both sides. That gets me x squared minus 64 equals 0. Now it's got two terms. It's a subtraction problem. They're both perfect squares. It's a difference of perfect squares. What multiplies together to give me x squared? X and x. What multiplies together to give me negative 64? Positive 8 and negative 8. We can check it. X squared minus 8x plus 8x, your middle term drops out, and then minus 64. Now we're solving. X minus 8 equals 0. X will equal 8. X plus 8 equals 0. X will equal negative 8. That's difference of perfect squares. Okay? Remember I said always look for GCFs. It will make ugly problems sometimes a lot easier. If you have a problem 81 x squared minus 9x, you might say, oh, difference of 81 is a perfect square, but 9x, is that a perfect square? Let's check. We can factor out the greatest common factor of 9x. 9x times what gives me 81x squared? It would be 9x. 9x times 1 gives me negative 9x, and that would be 9x times negative 1 gives me negative 9x. So we have factored it. Now to solve it, we take our 9x, set it equal to 0. 9x equals 0. Divide by 9, you get x is 0. And the other one, 9x minus 1 equals 0. You add 1 to both sides. 9x equals 1. Divide by 9. X equals 1/9. So our zeros there would be 0 and 1/9. Okay. Another greatest common factor problem to practice. 6a squared minus 3a equals 0. Greatest common factor 3a. If we factor out a 3a times what gives me 6a squared? 2a. 3a times what gives me negative 3a, which would be negative 1. Solving it, 3a equals 0. Divide by 3, a equals 0. 2a minus 1 equals 0. Add 1 to both sides. 2a equals 1. Divide by 2. A equals 1/2. Okay, all of those problems you have done before, but we're just making sure that you got it figured out. Remember what we were doing before. Some more problems. These were the ones that were the trickier ones. So let's get this out of here. Technical difficulties. Okay, ax squared plus bx plus c. This is when you had an a term that was not 1. So now we got to look at the factors of our a term, 6, which could be 2 or 3, 3 and 2, 1 and 6, or 6 and 1, and the factors of our c term, which are 1 and 5, or 5 and 1. So let's look over here at the steps. When the leading coefficient is not 1, we're saying, what do we multiply together to get 6x squared? We just listed those. And what do you know about your signs? Okay, if this sign is a negative, that tells me my signs are opposites. We don't know which is the plus and which one's the minus, but we do know our signs are opposites. Third thing, what multiplies together to get me negative 5? And we listed those things out here also. And the big thing here is step 4. When you FOIL the outside and the inside, you must get positive 13. So I took a stab in the dark. I don't usually start with the 1 and somethings, so I'll start with the 2's and 3's. I did 3x. I know my signs are opposite. I don't know which one's where. Negative 5 only has one pair factor, so I put those in, and let's check. 6x squared, we know that's right. Outside gave me a negative 15x. Inside or inner gave me a positive 2x. So negative 15x and positive 2x gives me 13 negative x. Okay, we don't want negative 13x, we want positive 13x. So we're looking at what our outside gives us and our inside gives us, and that's where we have to get our positive 13 at. Okay, so I checked it with FOIL, didn't work. So it worked, number was right, sign was wrong. So when your number is right, but your sign is wrong, all you need to do is switch the signs from what was here positive to now is negative. What was negative here is now positive. So let's check and see if it works. Our outer gives me 15x. Our inside, our inner, gives me negative 2x. When I add those together, I get the 13x I'm looking for. Then you would solve. We've practiced that. That's finding your zeros, finding your roots, finding your x-intercepts. They would be x equals 1/3 and x equals negative 5/2 if we had taken the time to do that one. Okay, next problem, just when our leading coefficient is 1, we are just looking for the factors of C that add up to B. Okay, and that's what we've got written here. When the leading coefficient is 1, factors of C that add up to B. So what multiplies together to give me x squared? We know it's x and x. What do we know about our signs? They're the same. Looking at our middle term, both of them are positive. So what multiplies together to give me 20? That adds to give me 9. It would be x plus 5 and x plus 4. If you were asked to solve, you would find your zeros. Those would be your x-intercepts. It would be x equals negative 5 and x equals negative 4. Okay, the last one that we're going to go through today is factor by grouping. The big telltale that it is a grouping problem is there are 4 terms. 4 things being added or subtracted from one another. So our problem was 15x squared minus 5x minus 3x plus 1. I always start by changing a subtraction to adding the opposite. Okay, we're going to walk through the steps and show how to do this at the same time. Step 1, we're going to start by grouping the first 2 terms together and the second 2 terms together. That's why I put the parentheses around the first 2 terms and the second 2 terms. Step 2, factor out the greatest common factor. The goal is to get the 2 parentheses to look the same. So greatest common factor in my first parenthesis is 5x. When I factor out the 5x, we're saying what times 5x gives me 15x squared? It would be 3x. What times 5x gives me negative 5x? It would be negative 1. Okay, we want this other parenthesis to look the same as that one, so if we factor out a negative 1, negative 1 times what gives me negative 3x? It would be a positive 3x. Negative 1 times what gives me a positive 1? It would be a negative 1. So we have reached our goal. Our 2 parentheses look identical. Okay, step number 4. What is the greatest common factor, or what is the same on both sides of the subtraction sign? And that is our 3x minus 1. When we factor out our 3x minus 1, it comes out. What's left, I'm going to take my fingers here and try and cover what we factored out. What's left is your other parenthesis of 5x minus 1. What's left makes the other parenthesis. Okay, again, we're going to solve. 3x minus 1 equals 0. Add 1 to both sides. 3x equals 1. Divide by 3. X is 1/3. 5x minus 1 equals 0. Add 1. 5x equals 1. Divide by 5. X equals 1/5. Okay. I know that I only went through one example of factoring by grouping. You only have one of those for homework. If you have questions and want to go through some more, I will be glad to go through them. Here's what I've learned. Nothing is ever easy when you're doing it for the first time. I really botched things up with Zoom last week. I've now got a code that will be the same every day. It's on the landing page. If you want to watch this before our Monday Zoom so that you can ask questions, that'd be great. If you want to have Zoom first and talk about the other assignment that was posted, that's fine also. Remember, you can always call me. I will walk you through things. Lots of you are using that. You're calling, you're talking, you're texting. I greatly appreciate that. So here's your homework that I'm going to post for Monday. They're all odd. Remember, we want to be using the back of the book to help us check our answers. If it's not working, give me a call. I'll be glad to talk you through it. You don't need to email me the results of this, but just let me know, text me, got it, it makes sense, or lost, I need help, 911, help Mrs. Deutsch, and I'll be right there for you. Okay, our assignment is page 242, 21 through 39, add, check them in the back book, call if you need, and remember, review your notes from our worksheets, which were called Chapter 9. I hope you have a great day. I hope it's sunny and beautiful on Monday like it is today on Saturday when I'm videoing this, trying to get ahead of the game. We'll talk soon, and I missed your smiling faces. I wish we were back in school. Hang in there. We will get through this together. Talk soon. Bye.